often find that you deal with a sense of tightness or discomfort through your inner groin or hips? Well, there's a good chance that you are missing out on one of the most underutilized and overlooked muscles in your body, your adductors. This set of muscles aid in common movement patterns such as walking, lateral movement, and also help to provide a sense of stability through the pelvis. Throughout the course of this video, you will learn how to properly integrate and sensate this often overlooked muscle group to improve your movement efficiency and quality. Let's get into it. So for this first technique, we're gonna work on sensitizing. We're just bringing some feedback into what it actually feels like to feel our adductors. So you can grab a yoga block. A ball would work here as well. We're just gonna use this as a tool to create feedback against. So once you have the tool of your choice, you are gonna come onto your back. And what we're gonna focus on is initially just taking the block this way, in between your thighs. And we're gonna do a gentle hip lift. So I'm not gonna focus so much on thrusting my hips towards the ceiling. We're actually gonna focus more on a heel drag. So I'm gonna imagine with my feet that I'm pulling this way, and that's just gonna bring a little bit more sensation into the hamstrings. And we're gonna attempt to try to match that with a adductor squeeze. Now, when we go to link the adductors, what I would encourage is taking the block about halfway up, and you can just focus on squeezing initially, kind of from the highest part of your groin, while you keep this gentle hip lift. So I'm thinking about just keeping my tailbone slightly tucked, not so much where I'm going into a lumbar flexion, but just enough where my lumbar is gonna be staying more or less neutral. You can even put your hand there for some feedback. And not only am I gonna be focusing on the press down through the hamstrings, but also that squeeze. And it's kind of a 50-50 relationship between those two systems. What I would suggest here is holding this for anywhere between about 30 to 45 seconds. You can take a break, and then I'd repeat that at least twice. Now, once you have the general feedback of what it feels like to connect the hamstrings and the adductors, we can use this to start to bring ourselves into a little bit more of a progressive exercise where we will be taking our knee onto the side like so. And this is going to be important that we imagine we have that same sort of block on the inner thigh to create that adductor feedback before we even lift the hips off. So we're going to be thinking about trying to lift our hips up this way, but we're going to be thinking about doing so from, again, that deepest part of the adductor as possible. And to start with this one, just some general cues, just being mindful that the elbow is more or less right underneath the shoulder. We don't want it too close or too far out, just so we have kind of a nice base of support through the upper body. And it's not gonna be a ton of press here, just enough so I have a baseline of shoulder stability. And the focus is gonna be on this leg that we have on the box. So I'm gonna gently think about just lifting my hips up, almost into this side plank position, primarily being driven from this adductor and the knee driving down. And that's gonna be what pulls my hips up. Now, if I wanna make this more challenging, I can also think about taking this bottom leg off. And now I'm completely suspended off this leg and this arm. If I wanna make it a little bit easier, you can have that leg stay down. And the intention is that my hips won't touch. They're gonna come just above the floor, and then I'm gonna think about taking my hip bone towards the ceiling. So I'm taking it up this way, and that's gonna give me a lot of feedback, not only into this adductor, but also into these obliques. So really good exercise to link the shoulders to the adductor to the obliques, but first being mindful to draw sensation to that on your back, and then you can build into that side plank Copenhagen exercise. So keep that yoga block handy because we're gonna need it for the second technique here as well. What we're gonna do is take it up against the wall, and we're gonna focus on linking the adductors to hip rotation, which is a very important function for lateral movement, for walking, and a bunch of other movement patterns. So we're gonna take this up to the wall. We'll be mindful that the ankle is directly underneath the knee, and there's kind of almost one line between where our hip and our ankle are. From here, we're gonna begin to introduce a gentle push into the wall, again, from that highest part of the adductor that you can access. What we're gonna start to come into is a slight hinge. So I'm beginning to take this hip bone and I'm projecting it towards the back wall while I am keeping this adductor feedback. And you can see that my upper body is kind of just naturally going into a rotation this way. And that is going to open up a lot of the glute fibers on this backside and the hamstring. And now keeping that gentle draw towards the midline or into the wall, I'm just going to use that to stand up with. Some things to be mindful of here is that as you're coming down, try to keep the toes and the feet relatively relaxed. You can almost sense that you're getting heavy into the foot itself, almost through the midfoot. We'll do a brief pause at the bottom, and then we're gonna come up over about a 3 to 5 second count. To start with, it's always helpful to go through an exercise a little bit more slowly so you can try to teach or guide the body where you want tension to be as you're going through the movement. And then as you get more comfortable and the coordination starts to get a little bit more in sync, we can start to pick up the speed and the power, or we can start to introduce load. So there's no reason why you couldn't throw a dumbbell on this front hand. I would recommend working through this for anywhere between about 8 to 12 reps. Again, tempo here initially is important, 3 to 5 seconds each way. So now that we have worked on sensitizing the adductors and also linking that to a single leg position, we're gonna start to add more of a dynamic motion to this as we do. So you're gonna come into a decently wide base, certainly a little bit wider than your shoulders. What I'm gonna encourage you to do here is almost drop yourself down into a semi-horse stance, where my feet are kind of slightly angled out this way. What we're gonna attempt to do here is link our adductors to hip rotation while we go off a pivot on the opposing leg. So I'm gonna pivot off this back leg, and as I do that, I'm gonna think about meeting my left adductor in this case. So I just have a subtle amount of feedback into this leg to kind of pull me into weight and rotation on this left side. Now when we start to swing it back the other way, what we're gonna try to do is open up first with the hip. That's gonna give you a sense of adductor length, which in then turn I can pull myself into. What we're gonna be working is kind of just this dynamic motion of kind of what it feels like to lead with the hips first, commit weight to the one leg, and all I want you to kind of be familiar with or try to get familiar with is what it feels like to initially get length through the adductor, as then you kind of meet stability from one hip to the other. Now it's certainly not gonna be only the adductor at play. We certainly will get some feedback in through things like the glutes and the hamstrings to support this, but I just want you to have a general awareness around what it feels like to have the adductors online as you go through this hip rotation. So now that you got kind of a general feel for that hip rotation, we can start to link in our upper body. So what we're gonna do is just add a rotation. For now, I just want you to think you're gonna be doing a hook from one side to the other. So I'm linking the hips to the upper body. I'm allowing my upper body to almost rotate, kind of like this spindle on top of the stability of the pelvis. So we have this hook happening, and on this back arm, let's start to open that up. So palm is gonna come out as this arm comes on top, and we're just gonna have more or less a smooth cadence of rhythm in through the upper body as we're going through this rotation. And it's all happening on top of my lower body stability. So the adductors, the hamstrings, the glutes, like I mentioned, are all contributing to me arriving at this point of stability. Now just be mindful that there's no need to go through this as fast as you can to start with. The intention here to begin is to just get a sense of stability from one side to the other, the weight transfer, the rhythm, and then we can start to increase the power through the arms, and that's gonna be what pulls me from side to side or creates that momentum. What I would suggest here is going through this for anywhere between 14 to about 20 reps. You can use this as a warm-up, as a way to kind of break up your strength work and just add a more dynamic and rhythmic motion into your regimen. So as you have come to learn throughout the course of this video, if you are dealing with tight adductors or a tight inner groin, to some degree, we do want to create length through there, but we also want to focus on strength. And not just strength of the adductor muscle itself, but also how it integrates into other musculature around the pelvis. And chances are that if you are experiencing tightness through your adductors or really anywhere else in the hips, then the glutes probably aren't too far behind. So if you want to go learn more about how the glutes play a role in this whole pelvic complex, then you can go watch another video I did on that right